Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, May 5th, 2021, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the University of Texas Tribune polling data in the state that gives us approval rating numbers for the president, Joe Biden, the governor, Greg Abbott, and both senators, John Cornyn and Ted Cruz. They actually go so far as polling the approval rating of the lieutenant governor, the Texas Speaker of the House, and the attorney general. But since those three people aren't necessarily on the mainstream political stage, I'm not going to be talking about them too intently. Also, the majority of Texans, did have an opinion of them, but not enough to actually say that the general population in Texas knows who the lieutenant governor is, knows who the Texas Speaker of the House is, knows who the attorney general is. Very well-known names, obviously, the two senators, the governor, and President Biden. The rest seem to be pretty much dipping off in terms of overall approval rating, simply because of the fact that not many voters knew who they were. So don't look at those approval ratings and look at them in the negative double digits. It's largely because Democrats were in firm opposition because they probably did know who those candidates were or who these names were, but for the Republicans, not many of them did. So keep that in mind. But for the rest of the four people I'm going to be taking a look at, assume that almost every Texan knows exactly who they are. And the University of Texas Tribune poll shows some surprisingly interesting results. Now, for Joe Biden, he is not approved of in the state of Texas. He's actually disapproved of. What you'll notice is that President Biden has a 44% approval rating amongst Texan voters and a 46% disapproval rating. So this isn't exactly where Biden would want to be, at least nationally speaking, but in Texas, this is actually a pretty good poll. For Joe Biden to be approved of by 44% of Texas voters, that means more voters than what voted for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election in Texas approve of Joe Biden. So he's already made some incremental gain relative to her. Also, in the 2020 election result, Joe Biden received 46.5% of the vote. That's not necessarily as large as 44%, less than 44%, meaning that he seems to have reduced in terms of support, but this is still right where he needs to be, because the disapproval rating is just 46%. Looking at the numbers as well, 52% plus of the voters in Texas actually voted against Joe Biden. They voted for other candidates, whether that be a write-in, a third party, or Donald Trump. The point is, the majority of Texas voters did not vote for Joe Biden. He lost by a margin of 6 points. So if you're looking at the approval rating, being down 2 points doesn't look so bad. And we can take a look at it relative to the other politicians in the state, because Joe Biden, surprisingly enough, has the highest approval rating of any of these people mentioned. Take a look. If you're looking at the approval rating for Ted Cruz and John Cornyn and Greg Abbott, none of them actually reach 44%. The most is Ted Cruz and Greg Abbott at 43%, and then John Cornyn, the senator who was just reelected in 2020, being at 31%. Now, I'm surprised very few people know of John Cornyn. He was just elected, but he doesn't really hold too much vital information. He's not nearly as pro-Trump as Ted Cruz or as far down that pipeline as Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz will also be the one who's up for re-election closer than John Cornyn, who was up in 2026. So pretty much, I said that we were going to be excluding Dan Patrick, Dade Phelan, and then Ken Paxton, but we're also going to be excluding John Cornyn. I don't really think that he needs to be discussed too intently. He just won re-election. He doesn't hold too much of an implication in terms of his approval rating. But, looking at Ted Cruz and and Greg Abbott, I find it to be very interesting that Biden is doing better than them in terms of overall approval. Obviously, very different bases approve of Ted Cruz versus approve of Greg Abbott. Greg Abbott at -2, very similar to Joe Biden. Ted Cruz at -5. So Biden is doing better than Cruz in terms of overall percentages. Overall percentages, and also in terms of margin. Joe Biden has a smaller disapproval number than Ted Cruz, higher than Greg Abbott, but the approval rating number is higher. So both of them are about even in terms of Biden and Abbott, but Ted Cruz seems to be doing worse than both Biden and Abbott. And that makes sense. If you're looking at the 2018 election results in Texas, Ted Cruz won by 2.8%. He barely won his election, and it was not supposed to be this, or 2.4%. I don't know if this is the most updated numbers, or 2.6%. I don't know why I said 2.4. But, looking at the numbers here, Ted Cruz didn't win by a lot in 2018. He did not win by a lot, and he's actually moved further to the right, moved further to being pro-Trump, pro-Make America Great Again, pro-Keep America Great, whatever it is now, right? So he is fully on the Trump wing of the Republican Party. I wouldn't have said the same back in 2018. Yes, he campaigned with President Trump. Yes, of course, he endorsed him and, was fully okay with that endorsement and that recognition from the president, but he wasn't nearly as far down that path of being, for the big lie and for a lot of the things that President Trump was that you wouldn't necessarily have expected from the runner-up in the 2016 Republican primary. But the main takeaway is that Joe Biden's approval rating is better than Ted Cruz's, but there's also some electoral implications of Ted Cruz's approval rating. The approval rating likely has dipped down to a combination of factors, including the insurrection and a number of things that could have come along the way, including his trip to Cancun. I know some people have, attacked me for bringing that up as a major point, but attack ads truly do work. People in New Hampshire didn't necessarily forget that Donald Trump called them a drug-infested den back in 2017. There's reasons why voters move away from candidates, and things that they did 10 years ago can certainly have a tremendous implication, much less for Ted Cruz's situation, 3 years until his election. So if you're looking at the approval rating of Ted Cruz, it has certainly taken a dip. But none, have seen a significant enough change as Greg Abbott in the state of Texas. Greg Abbott being disapproved of by 2% is something that needs to be pointed out. Because when he was reelected in 2018, he was reelected by a large margin. While Ted Cruz was only winning by 2.6%, Greg Abbott was winning by double digits. He was winning by, 13.3%? He was decimating Lupe Valdez, the Democratic opponent. It wasn't a safe margin, but it was certainly a very large one, nearing safe. 13.3% on the same ballot. Ted Cruz wins by 2.6% means there was a lot of Democratic crossover support. I don't think people realize how close Texas actually was in 2018 and how close it was to having a Democratic senator. But on the governor level, it was not nearly as close and wasn't even within the realm of possibility looking at these numbers. Fort Worth, Tarrant County voted for Greg Abbott. In terms of Beto O'Rourke, voted for Beto O'Rourke. So very different results from the same county. Very drastically different ones as well, because Greg Abbott was winning by double digits in Tarrant County, despite it being a population center with a lot of votes, a lot of minorities in this county, which of course skews it to the left. But if you're looking at where, Greg Abbott was able to do well and why was he able to do so well, you do have to ask, why was Greg Abbott able to outperform Ted Cruz by over 10 points? Well, it largely had to do with approval rating, with the way that voters believed Greg Abbott was doing a good job in the state of Texas. In fact, as of July of 2018, right into the election, Greg Abbott was amongst the top 10 governors, the top 10 most popular governors in the entire country. Yes, you heard me right. Greg Abbott was at 56% to 26%. That is a net approval rating of 30 points. Today, it's -2. So you go from being approved of by 30 points down to -2. So why might this be? Well, I think largely due to the infrastructure in the state of Texas. After Texas was hit very hard with, the snow and just a number of factors that made Greg Abbott seem a weak governor, there was just so many things that piled up on Greg Abbott that made him disapproved of. You don't go from just being plus 30 in your reelection bid in 2018, and by the way, there are no term limits for Greg Abbott, so he can run as long as he wants to as the governor. But how do you go from plus 30 down to -2? A number of things happened. Greg Abbott also seems to have taken the Republican Trump pathway, as well as all of them seem to have done, just because they don't want to be primary, they don't want to be, see firm opposition. Pretty much Greg Abbott is going to be viewed as another extension of President Trump's, policy, an extension of President Trump's political power. And while he didn't run on a Trump platform when he was first elected for obvious reasons, all the Republicans, almost all of them, seem to have adapted it now. And Greg Abbott is probably going to do so. He's so definitely going to be receiving the endorsement of President Trump, certainly going to be flaunting the endorsement of President Trump, using it in campaign ads, going to rallies, potentially with President Trump. Greg Abbott being disapproved of means that his race might be competitive in 2022, that the governor's race might seem to be a competitive one. Now, I'm not going to say that Greg Abbott is going to lose because he's down -2. I don't think that at all. I think that you can disapprove of someone and vote for them. I believe that Joe Biden or the Democratic Party will improve on their margin, even if Biden's approval rating isn't nearly as high. And I also do want to point out that Texas does sometimes have a history of disapproving of people that they vote for. In Texas, when Donald Trump left office, it was -5% in terms of overall approval. So Biden is doing better than Trump in the state of Texas currently. And if you take a look at the trend over time, the 2016 election, or 2020 election, sorry about that, his disapproval rating actually was pretty high. Let's go ahead and go state by state and then click on Texas just so we can get there. I don't know if it's going to show us Texas. We can just type it in, Texas, and then I can show you. But you'll notice that the disapproval rating, didn't actually change too much after the Capitol insurrection. It was right around the point that it needed to be. So let's see. It was not necessarily approved of on election day. It was tied. Yeah, I knew that it wasn't approved of. I knew that it was somewhere either in the negative or tied, and it was tied. So in Texas, despite Donald Trump winning by 6 points, he was only approved of by 0. He was tied. It was 49-49. So while he did leave with the -5, he was reelected by 6 points in this state by being tied. So with Biden being -2, I don't view that as an automatic, counting out of him potentially doing well in Texas in 2024. Do I truly think Texas is going blue in 2024? No. I'm being realistic. Texas is probably not going to flip. The Democrats have this scenario in which they believe they are going to win Texas in 2024. Probably not going to happen. But I will say that they will make some gains. They will probably narrow up the margin yet again. And if Biden is able to hold at -2, he probably will do better. I mean, it makes sense. Again, voters may vote for people that they disapprove of. The same way Texas did in 2020. He probably was supposed to, lose based off those numbers. If you're looking at an incumbent president who had just won by 9 points, chances are you're probably going to assume they're going to lose in a state where they're not even approved of, but that wasn't the case. He only reduced by 3 points. For Joe Biden's case, I think that he will do well in 2024. The Democratic Party will do well in Texas in 2024 with Ted Cruz's seat. But the one thing that I do think is going to be a huge reduction in support is Greg Abbott's race in 2022. This race will likely be competitive. Depending on the Democratic nominee, it might be winnable. Now, I'm not going to say that a Democrat is going to win in Texas. I think that it's possible. I think there's always that possibility, especially in a state where we've seen the governor go from being approved of by 30 down to -2. That's a huge reduction, a huge decrease in support, and a lot of things have happened since 2018. A lot of things that Texas probably couldn't have foreseen. I can tell you now, the scandals with the Texas infrastructure are going to be brought back up. The consideration that Ted Cruz, Greg Abbott, John Cornyn are not the right senators or governors or representatives for Texas, that argument is going to be brought back up in 2022. And Greg Abbott is already seeing a decrease in support because of it. And depending on the candidate that runs, because we don't see any major candidates running for the Democratic nomination in the Texas governor's race, you have Joaquin Castro, Julian Castro, Wendy Davis, who actually ran for governor back in 2014 against Greg Abbott. You have Lina Hidalgo, and then you have Beto O'Rourke. Now, Beto O'Rourke seems to be the one that is being viewed as the best candidate for 2022 Texas governor race, but he potentially might be trying to make a comeback in 2024 against Ted Cruz. Now, he has said that nothing is off the table. He says nothing's changed and nothing I said would preclude me from considering a run in the future. Now, this was April of 2021, so just around a month ago, he was saying he has, the possibility of running. Before, he counted out a run for governor. He had said that, I probably won't be running for governor. However, now he's saying nothing's stopping me. Nothing I had said before says that I will not be running for any office. So him saying this sort of opens up the possibility that he might be running for governor or might be running for Senate. We don't know yet, but Beto O'Rourke seems to be under consideration, and these numbers only seem to be positive, really, for Joe Biden. And while he is disapproved of, I will say that compared to the other people on this list, it is very interesting to see that he's approved of more than Ted Cruz, more than Greg Abbott, more than John Cornyn, more than the lieutenant governor, the Republican Speaker of the House, than the Attorney General. Joe Biden seems to be at the highest point, even though his no opinion number is actually higher than Ted Cruz's. So these are very recognizable names. This is not a situation of, people don't know who Ted Cruz is, people don't know who Greg Abbott is. That is not the case in Texas. Chances are you know who your governor is. Chances are you know who your senator is, especially after everything that's happened in Texas. Chances are you do know the president. I don't think that needed to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway. So I don't really see this as a negative thing for Biden. Obviously, you don't want to be -2 points, but if it's Texas, it makes sense. If he's a Democratic president in Texas, he probably shouldn't even be approved of more than the Republican senators or the Republican governor. That really doesn't make sense. But that's the reality we're working in. People don't realize that Texas is actually closer than you might think. 2018 was a perfect example. 2020 was a perfect example. Joe Biden did better than any other Democrat since Jimmy Carter seriously speaking. It was exceptionally close for a Democrat that was viewed as an establishment, old type of Democrat, the more, establishment and, older type of Democrat that seems to be out of touch with voters. And people were saying, Joe Biden was going to do exceptionally worse amongst Latino voters. While he did see a decrease in support amongst Latino voters, he did not see a dramatically, significant shift on the national level. Donald Trump did narrowly improve his margin. And while the numbers did seem to be, huge shifts in Texas and Florida, overall, nationally speaking, it wasn't that significant of a reduction. In addition, Joe Biden was able to improve amongst the counties with very large white suburban populations, voters that are traditionally conservative voters that backed Joe Biden and the Democrats in the 2020 election. So Joe Biden, if I'm looking at this and I'm him, I'm saying, obviously I want to improve, but this is not bad. Relative to Ted Cruz and Greg Abbott, I see this as a win, which is why I'm telling you that the Biden campaign would actually be pretty surprised and pretty happy with some of these numbers, especially since we're seeing a huge amount of voters on the issue of immigration alone disapproving of Joe Biden. That's a huge issue across the southern border in Texas. And if his approval rating is actually at 44%, considering that immigration is probably a number one issue or number two or number three issue for voters in Texas, I view this as a win for Joe Biden, but not so much for Ted Cruz or Greg Abbott. Obviously, all of them are disapproved of. You never want to be disapproved of, but for Joe Biden's sake, I think he would view this as something that is beneficial for him and the Democrats. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 midterm election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.